Today we're going to talk about the epigenetics of trauma, intergenerational trauma, and trauma-induced shame. We're going to mention an interesting fact about each of them and something we can do that can help to mitigate those risks. The epigenetics of trauma includes when parents have gone through trauma in their own lives before they become parents, and then their offspring expresses their genes differently based on their parents' traumatic experiences. The epigenetics of trauma also includes what happens to the fetus in utero. So what kind of environment the mother is in that results in the fetus responding differently in utero or shortly after birth, so that once again, the genes do not change, but the expressions of those genes change. One example of how genes express themselves differently according to research in the offspring is when the parents have gone through huge trauma, like there's been research done on Holocaust survivors and then their direct offspring, and the offspring's response to stress and also to immunity, their immune function. Also, when the moms were exposed to hunger, their children in the future had an increased risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So we see that when the parents went through something that was traumatic in their lifetime, even before conception, or as the child was exposed in utero to different factors, or shortly after, their genes can express themselves differently. Intergenerational trauma is trauma that slowly gets passed down through generations. And if you look back into your family habits and cycles, oftentimes you will notice that different habits will run in families, both good and bad. And those are things that we can actually look at, which we are doing as having this conversation and talking about trauma, is we can say, I'm going to stop this cycle. So when we look at our cycles of how did our parents treat us, then we can be more mindful of how we want to treat our children. We can also look at the cycles of what kind of relationships did our parents and grandparents have? How were women treated? How were men expected to behave? And what are my expectations? We can also ask ourselves our relationship with food. What have we observed from the generations with the relationships of food? And how has that influenced ours? And this is slowly how we unpack and stop negative cycles. And also we start positive cycles for the next generation. So in adulthood, and especially in childhood, human beings have a need to make sense of the world and to believe that the world is a decent place. And when people are treated in a really abusive way or in an unfair way, or something really overwhelming happens, it's a human response to think, well, it cannot be that the whole world doesn't make sense. It has to be, so this is like a false explanation that the body tells itself. So there must be something within me that's deserving to be treated this way, and therefore I am deserving of feeling ashamed, or I am not worthy, or I am not important. So it's a way of almost trying to make sense of the world by internalizing how we were treated. Another factor that comes up with this is people feel intrinsically the need to have a sense of control over their lives, over their bodies. And so when something really overwhelming happens, or traumatic happens, or abusive happens, we think to ourselves, well, if I didn't behave in this way, it wouldn't have happened to me. Therefore, I have control over what's going to happen in the future because I just won't do this one thing. Or if I didn't wear this certain thing, then this traumatic event wouldn't have happened to me. Therefore, if I just don't wear that thing, that set of pants or dress again, then that thing won't happen to me again. So it's almost the mind's way of regaining control over our lives and our bodies by saying, well, I do have control over what's going to happen in the future because this was in some way my fault. Alternatively, if we think I had no control over that event, it wasn't my fault, and there's nothing I could have done to prevent it from happening, that's a scary thought to live with. And that's something that is a very traumatic event to process, while also contending with the fact that there was no control. And in the future, we also just can't guarantee that we can stop terrible things from happening. Therefore, it's a survival response of internalizing shame and saying, oh, I played a role in this, or I deserved this in some way. So when it comes to the epigenetics of trauma, intergenerational trauma, and trauma-induced shame, we all come down to one very important factor, and that's our body's ability to once again recognize what we truly want, what we truly feel, to move away from dissociation so that we can identify once again what our own body really wants, how we want to be treated, what we think, what our opinions are, what our voice really wants to say. It's coming back to the body somatically to say, what does my body feel? Despite the epigenetics, despite the intergenerational cycles, despite the shame that might have come up, what does my body truly feel? And that in itself is a practice. But learning what the body feels and what the body's internal voice is, once again, will slowly counteract all of the different messages that we have received, either generationally or throughout our environment, that might not have been supportive of us. So really offering our body the opportunity to notice, can I feel my feet? What do my feet feel like? What does my voice feel like when I speak my truth? What does my brain feel like when I actually validate my own thought processes and opinions? What does that feel like? What is being important and validating my own voice and my own body and my own being feel like? And those are the processes we want to slowly tap into somatically and mindfully, so that we can come back to the body step by step, slowly but surely, so that we're not tapping into the larger traumas and we're tapping into the wisdom of the body, and then expressing that wisdom, whether it's through somatic work, whether it's through movement, whether it's through writing, whether it's through using your voice or singing or speaking your truth. Wishing you a good day.